What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hey Yo Foxboro with me, Sara Marshall, of course. And today we have a lovely lady joining me to talk all things Patriots versus Panthers game on Friday night. You may know her from Twitter, but she works behind the scenes on some of your favorite shows at FS1. She has her own podcast called Almost Shameless, and her name is Tanya Ray Fox. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Sara. Apologies to anybody if my audio is off. The mic is not cooperating today. We'll see what happens, but I promise to speak loudly and clearly. That's one thing I don't have a problem with.
No, I know, and that's why I'm like, you sound okay to me. So I think we're gonna be okay. So let's just jump straight into it because I feel like there's so much to talk about, despite the fact that it was a preseason game. So I want to talk about the Patriots offense first, because obviously we saw that the Patriots had their starters in, I think, for the first 3 drives, and the first 2 did not look good. They couldn't get anything done. It was 2 3 and outs. There was just nothing working. I think they were trying to implement the run game again, and it just couldn't get anywhere. But finally, on their 3rd drive, they were actually able to get a touchdown. But before, I just realized I skipped over this. Before we get into it, yesterday, Buddy and I were live talking pregame, and we talked about what we were hoping to see in the game. So since I wasn't able to ask you, what were you hoping to see? I know that we're talking about it post game, but what were you hoping to see in general from the Patriots in this game?
Yeah, so disclaimer, my stance on preseason games is that we learn about 5% of what we expect to learn, right? If you take a whole chunk of the 100% of questions we have, we're going to get about 5% of those answers. No matter what preseason it is, whether you have Tom Brady, Mac Jones, or anybody else, like, we have to cover these games. We are interested in these games. But realistically, like, it has become a thing that we have to, by nature of being media and talking about it, we have to treat it with a real sense of urgency. But it's tough because I think we learn a lot more from camp and practices and things like that than we do from these games a lot of times. So, it's like, Mac is only so if he's only in there for 3, 4, 5 drives at a time, and then we're looking at Bailey Zappi, like, we're kind of playing pretend a lot here. Like, this is not, anytime you've got nearly 3/4 of Zappi at quarterback, like, everything's got to be readjusted. Expectations have got to be readjusted.
Right.
That's the most important position in all of team sports, and we're looking at a backup. However, the one thing I feel like everybody can agree on that we're looking to see is what happens with the wide receivers. It's like the biggest question mark that the Patriots have had for, honestly, since Tom Brady's last season in 2019. Like, this has been a question mark over and over again. And I do think that preseason games and preseason and practices and training camp things, though, I think wide receivers can make a really big difference. And there is something to be drawn from watching them in those games and scrimmages and practices. So wide receivers for sure is something I'm always going to keep an eye on before we get into the regular season when it comes to the Patriots.
Yeah, that was what I said was one of my biggest things too, because, this is the first year, like you were saying, since Tom Brady left, that there's actually a competition and that they're not kind of scrambling to try and find anybody that can be productive for them. The fact that they have this many guys that are performing as well as they are in camp and in preseason so far is a little bit more exciting since 2019, basically. So we did see some good things from them, but do you have any secret favorites that you're like, other than, of course, Kendrick Bourne, who's been silent, which we'll get to in a second. But specifically like the younger guys like Trey Nixon, Wilkerson, Humphrey. Do you like any of those guys from like what you've seen so far?
I'm like ride or die for Lil Jordan. I'm like
Me
ride
too.
or die for him. I think having like a huge dude, a 6 foot, I think he's 6'4", 6'5", 225, like this massive sort of, obviously don't want to draw comparisons, but like Hernandez type built wide receiver / potential tight end. Bella talked about that a little bit. Like, for the Patriots right now, knowing where their offense is, like throw some big dudes out there. And obviously it's like, I understand it's preseason. I understand they're going up against like second and third stringers a lot of times, but 2 big games in a preseason is always a good sign.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, man. I like the idea of him sneaking in on that roster, maybe even over somebody like Trey Nixon. It's difficult. Again, like all these guys, like you said, like everybody's potential. The injury to Taekwon is huge. Alarming, and we don't know what's going on with Kendrick Bourne. I know these are all things we're going to talk about down the road, but my secret favorite is little Jordan, and I really like the team.
I know, and I actually wrote about that last night. It should be posted today, hopefully. But yeah, I feel like he's kind of become a favorite among Patriots fans in general. I mean, he was trending last night because, I mean, other than the fact that he has a great name, I think, he's been in both of these games. He was playing as tight end in last week because they only had Sokol in. This week, he had that crazy the diving to get the football out of the end zone on that punt return. So he's definitely, I would say, above the rest to make the roster. And I know that, the Taekwon injury definitely helps push him further, because if he hadn't been injured, then a lot of people didn't think he was going to make the team. He would make it somewhere else. And I was bummed because I was like, no, like he would be the biggest guy, like you were saying, the tallest guy, Josh Gordon-esque. Like he's done really well in camp, has really good preseason. So I feel like he deserves that. And then now that we know that, if anyone didn't see it, Mike Giardi of NFL Network just said that it's looking like Thornton will miss at least 8 weeks. I think we're about a little less than 3 weeks away from the season, so he would miss at least the first 4 games if they put him on IR. So that does open the door for somebody. And we talked a little bit about Trey Nixon, who was good in OTAs, but he's been kind of quiet in preseason. Now he's had some good moments in these games, in the preseason games so far, but I would say there's a reason why we're talking about Humphrey, and that's because he's outshined them. I want to ask you about Aguilar too, because he's been a favorite among a lot of people to be traded. Now that looks like that's kind of done with the Thornton injury, but I didn't see him at all on the trade market. I feel like he's done too well this camp. Although he had kind of a mediocre first year, I give leniency to that because it was his first season. We saw it was basically the Jacoby show and then Kendrick Bourne and Hunter Henry. So, I mean, he's competing with those guys, but he still was productive when he was actually given the ball. But what did you think? Did you think he was kind of a trade candidate? Was it really like he was the odd man out?
It always depends when you've got a new OC and there's like a regime change in terms of offensive play calling and what they're going to design and how the playbook's going to look. You can't really ever rule out what they've decided is going to be important. I assume that if they were ever considering trading Aguilar, that they saw somebody else on the depth chart that could replace the deep ball type receiver that he is. I mean, there's a reason that Mac had a better connection with guys who worked well in the backfield last season, because it was a very run heavy offense and he was doing a lot of the intermediate throws. Mac has had to work on his deep ball. He's done that. Aguilar is a type of receiver that's not going to thrive well if you just need somebody who can, either run like Kendrick Bourne was last season or go out of the slot. It's just, that's not necessarily his thing or how I think that they envision using him. Yeah. So it was really encouraging to see that really nice deep ball that set them up for the touchdown yesterday, because if there is a developed relationship between Mac and he is getting more accurate and a better arm on those deep throws, then Aguilar to me is a really nice piece. So the idea of trading him after seeing something like that becomes a little less likely, even without the Thornton injury. 2 years ago in his last season when he was playing with Derek Carr, that was a guy who was really making a difference downfield, and they need that. Now, are there bigger guys, maybe better jump ball guys, all that stuff on the roster? Fingers crossed. Yeah. But I think he brings a little bit of versatility compared to the rest of the guys that I personally like, and I was hoping to see it. I really had high hopes for him last season.
Me too.
So yeah, and we're going to get into this down the line, but what is this offense going to be about? What is their identity? That determines whether or not they need a player like Aguilar or not.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing I wanted to say when you mentioned the Raiders, one of my favorite stats to mention when it comes to Aguilar, and I've been mentioning it since he was first brought in, is when he was with the Raiders, he averaged 18 yards per reception.
Yeah.
So I'm like, we know what he's capable of, guys.
Yeah.
Like, he was just he was kind of just like they're still trying to figure out their identity, and that was happening last year too, because they had a rookie quarterback, and so they had to figure out what his strengths were and how to develop him. And this year they're trying to get him more involved in the offense. I think that he talked about that, working with Patricia and Belichick and coming up with what works, what he likes, what they feel like doesn't work, what he doesn't like. So I think with the receivers especially, they're going to have more defined roles, and maybe that's what's going to happen with Aguilar. We're going to see more of that deep field connection with Mac Jones, which is looking good. As you said, I mean, everyone was talking about that deep pass last night and saying all the people who think that Mac can't throw, we're going to be really upset at that clip. And I'm assuming they were. I didn't even bother to look because I don't got time for the haters, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they freaked out enough over the fact that he was on the NFL top 100. I don't need to see anything else. But did you see all that? You saw it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I made a TikTok about how dumb it was. So I was like, everybody's got to chill out. Like, if you're a starting quarterback in the NFL, especially if you're like a young franchise quarterback, like you're top 100, like I'm chill. He was 85. It's not like he was like top 50. Everybody relax.
Well, and what I thought was funny about it too was they were all mad because he was higher than Kirk Cousins. And I was like, since when do you guys think Kirk Cousins is an elite quarterback?
Yeah.
Oh,
all of a sudden, Kirk Cousins deserves respect. Like, ladies and gentlemen, Kirk Cousins has been the same level of quarterback consistently for the last decade. Like, he's not going to become anything better. Like, obviously potential speaks to players who are voting. Like, this is very easy. If we like, it's not a difficult concept. And I think most people would admit they understand the reason. They just don't like it. You know?
Yeah, it's just because he's a Patriot. They don't want the Patriots to be good. They were hoping of their demise once Brady left, and so they're sad that it's not happening. But I did see your TikTok, by the way. I think I saw it on your Instagram because I don't have a TikTok. So anyway, talking about Mac, what have you seen from him that you've liked so far? I know that the offense has been a struggle bus in training camp, and there's been a lot of focus on Mac, especially because he's shown that frustration. But I think we already kind of briefly touched on it. You know, they're going through a lot of changes right now. They have a new offensive coordinator or not offensive coordinator, depending on if you ask Belichick. So they have Matt Patricia involved. They have Joe Judge involved. Belichick is more involved in the offense. So that's just a lot of changes there. There's quite a few new players on offense that are going to be impactful this season. So I am not surprised by his frustration. But are you concerned at all about what he's looking like, or do you think that he could potentially have like a second-year jump?
Yeah, I mean, I do think he'll jump. Like, I just think it would be insane for him to regress. I mean, a regression in the second year would be a nightmare. I mean, that's just something that's almost like that's press the red button like territory there. No, I don't expect that. I definitely expect a level up in terms of like he was very accurate last year. So like he really just has to maintain accuracy and continue to work on his mechanics in terms of getting the ball down the field and reading defenses. Those are, I mean, they're average things. Like to me, Mac, he doesn't have to have an MVP caliber second season to improve. I'm concerned about how many cooks are in the kitchen on offense. I'm concerned that he's not entering a second season with a legitimate defined offensive strategy and playbook. I'm concerned that the guy calling plays has never been an offensive play caller before and is a remarkably failed head coach. Matt Patricia was the head coach of the Detroit Lions with Matt Stafford, and Matt Stafford immediately won a Super Bowl. You know, he couldn't get that team to the playoffs with a guy who went on to win the Super Bowl. Is that all on Matt Patricia? No, but like, he didn't bring out the best in a very, very good quarterback. And this is a guy who needs, in Mac, who needs a lot of guidance. And so I haven't seen anything from Mac in preseason, and I haven't been watching as closely as you have. A lot of what I'm seeing is like video and recaps after the camps because I'm not there, but
Right.
as far, I don't, I'm not panicking. And I think his at the thing that everybody knew about Mac starting out last year, which we heard time and time again, was like, he just handles pressure really well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can tell there's a guy who came from like a Nick Saban situation where like he's used to a lot of high pressure cooker situations and he just keeps his cool. And
Right.
I think he is a really good young leader and has the right attitude. And I don't think any of the struggles had in preseason or anything like that are his fault. So
Yeah.
like, I want to see, without knowing what their plan is on offense, like I feel like we really understood what everything was going to look like last year because we've watched Josh McDaniels year in, year out. We saw what he adjusted for with Cam Newton the year before. And so entering last year, they had a very similar system. We knew they were going to kind of plug in Mac, adjust for a little bit here and there. I just have no idea what's happening. So like, have I seen anything that makes me think Mac is going to win more games this season than last season based purely on the fact that he's improved? No, but like that's not really his fault either.
Yeah. 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 And I think I think that's more of the concern for me is not even like you were saying, it's not Mac. It's just like the situation that he's in. It's like these outside factors that could determine how he plays because he doesn't lack the skill. He doesn't lack the intelligence. He doesn't lack the capabilities. But when we aren't getting any clear idea of what they're doing or the direction that they're going in. And of course, we're just going to go off of what we see because we're not going to get those answers from Belichick. It's not like Belichick just like comes in every single press week and gives people the answers that they want, no matter how many times they ask. But that is the part I think that just concerns me because if it's confusing to us, it just kind of makes you wonder what's going on inside the building. Is it like less confusing to them? Or is it just because, we're on the outside looking in? And I think that's where my worry lies. I don't know if you agree, but
yeah, my thought process is that there's a strong chance that behind the scenes Belichick is working one-on-one with Mac and not telling us about it. What he did with Brady for years, like those meetings with Brady, like we take them for granted now, but there wasn't a lot of information about their relationship and how closely they worked on offense and him going defenses with Brady for the first 4, 5, 6, 7 years of their career together. That's something that's legend now, but for a long time, it was kind of on the down low, how close Belichick and Brady worked together on a weekly basis throughout the season. So I would love to think that Belichick is putting in some time with Mac one-on-one, knowing that this is the future of their franchise that they've invested a lot in. And I do think that Belichick's an underrated offensive mind. You don't work with the greatest quarterback of all time for as long as he did and help him to develop his ability to read defenses and break down the other side of the ball, all that stuff. Without like learning a thing or two from the GOAT, and they learn so much from each other. If there's one head coach, especially a defensive head coach in the NFL that knows how to communicate with a young quarterback, it's Bill Belichick. Everybody thinks of him as this defensive guy. Like he's been at the top of his game. He's at the top of the coaching ranks since the 1980s. So he can really coach on every single side of the ball. And like I said, everybody wants to give Tom Brady all this credit for the dynasty. Well, if you want to give him all the credit for the dynasty, then how about we at least acknowledge the fact that there was a coach on the other side of that desk every single week working with him who you can decide whether you think who was learning more from who, but nobody's had more time inside Tom Brady's brain outside of maybe Gisele Bündchen than Bill Belichick. I promise that I would bet my life that he's working way more with Mac behind the scenes than we realize.
It's funny because, that conversation is continuing. I just saw clips again of like Stephen A talking about they're waiting for their gotcha moment, I think, because they all want to believe that Belichick can't succeed without Brady. And we know that there's situations once Brady left New England are completely different. So, I was saying it's like they're dealing with a rookie quarterback, all sorts of new things. Brady went to a Super Bowl ready, basically, team. They were ready to go. They were stacked. So and it's been 3 years, right? Like, why are we still talking about this? Like, why don't we wait and see what happens? You can't be comparing the success of one single player and what he's doing now is not relevant to the success of his former coach. Like, I don't know why we're still talking about it, or why it's so almost taboo to try and say it was a collaborative effort. It's almost like you're not allowed to do that. And
well, I mean, behind the scenes, people do believe that. It's just what they say on TV. And like,
yeah.
I'm not tattletaling here, but like, that's the reality is like, do people sort of like lean one way or the other? Sure. Has Brady made a case for himself that's like hard to ignore? Sure. But like behind the scenes, there's nobody. And if you listen to people who genuinely break down the game, who aren't debate show people, but like real like podcasters and reporters and stuff, like for the most part, they agree Belichick's the greatest coach of all time. And that the game has gotten to a point in the 21st century where you have to also have the best quarterback. Coaching doesn't get you anywhere alone, and quarterback doesn't get you anywhere alone. So it's a much more tempered thing than daytime TV debate shows and Twitter would have people believe. And when all is said and done, the debate is going to even back out. And when they're both going into the Hall of Fame and everything else, I think it'll be really interesting to see how people treat it, because the only way that you argue against Belichick is if someone does better than Belichick. And so far, no one's really even come close. I mean, Andy Reid is like doing his absolute best, has a generational talent, and still has, one ring to show for his 25 years as a head coach or whatever it's been. So, like, show me who's next best and we'll go. And I think that that's where the conversation is going to temper off to once Brady's retired and once Belichick himself is retired.
And it's funny because we're even getting to the point, of course, everyone has their hot takes. Like you were basically just saying with the debate shows and whatnot, everyone's just trying to be provocative and get the most interactions. But I'm shocked to see how many people are kind of writing Mac off already. And even
really,
yeah, I'm seeing people do that. I to the point of I saw someone. I think I talked about it last week on here. There's a conspiracy theory going around that people truly believe that the reason why Belichick is not coming out and officially signing up for, like Matt Patricia is the offensive coordinator, or the reason why he brought back these guys is because he wants to fail this season. He wants to tank so that he can be higher in the draft to get a defensive player. And I was like, what part of Belichick strikes you as the type that would tank?
That's not even, I mean, that has to, like, did a real person say that, or was it on Twitter?
I'm seeing it on Twitter. I'm not saying a real person. I'm just saying I saw quite a few tweets about it, and I was like, where is this coming from? Like, it's truly bizarre. That's
coming from Stuart Gordon. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's like that's like being like, I think Belichick's going to try to tank this season so he can like fly off in one of Elon Musk's space shuttles and like settle Mars. Like, it's so fucking dumb that, oops, sorry, I don't know.
It's okay.
It's so dumb that like, I can't even really entertain it. Like I think, Mac, I heard a really smart person, I believe it was Kevin Clark talking on The Ringer about like, or maybe it was Stephen Ruiz. One of the guys who covers the NFL on the Ringer podcast was talking about Mac as sort of like on the low end, he could be like a Kirk Cousins or Ryan Tannehill, right? Or one of these guys where it's like, okay, that could be, if that's his ceiling, that's like a little bit of a disappointment, but he'll be a starter for a while. On the high end, maybe he becomes like a Matt Ryan, right? I think the big thing is that nobody thinks Mac Jones can become Josh Allen or Justin Herbert or Patrick Mahomes or any of the like truly like next level MVP candidate like type quarterbacks. And I think that's fair. Like Mac has not given us any reason to believe that all of a sudden he is going to become a top 5 or even really top 10 quarterback in the league right off of the next couple of seasons. Like we don't, but I think smart people see where he could slot himself in somewhere on the high end of Matt Ryan, maybe the low end of a Tannehill Cousins. And I think that's fair. Those types of teams can make Super Bowls. Will they be dynasties? No, but let's take what we can get for now and go from there.
Exactly. And I think that's part of the problem is obviously a lot of the people that you interact with on Twitter are going to be, the younger millennials or Gen Zers, and they've grown up in the Tom Brady Patriots era and they're not used to losing. And so this is the first time where they're having to go through the rebuilding process, and it's difficult for them to handle. So they have all this pressure on poor little Mac Jones that if he doesn't show up and he's not a Patrick Mahomes right away, if he's not looking like Tom Brady right away, then they need to move on, because what are we doing? And I'm like,
well,
go ahead.
Like, the bigger thing is that, like, he's not going to be that. Like, everybody's got to just adjust. Like, no, right now, he's not going to be Tom Brady. He's not going to be Peyton Manning. He's not going to be Aaron Rodgers, and he's not going to be Patrick Mahomes. That's not what he is. But there is only so many of those that come around. For the timing that the Patriots had to get a quarterback and how they handled it, I didn't want them to draft Mac Jones, but here we are, and he has really won my trust. And people have got to understand that, like, most teams have wallowed in quarterback hell at some point.
Yeah.
Just to get a sniff at someone even as good as Mac.
Yeah.
So, like, if you don't have one of the best 5 quarterbacks or a generational quarterback in charge of your team, it doesn't mean you can't win a title. It doesn't mean you can't be competitive. But it also, like, this is all or nothing stuff, especially with Patriots fans. It's like everybody has to either be the best quarterback in the league or they suck. Like, we're not going to put up with mediocrity. Like, guess what? Like, most teams are going to get a B+ quarterback at best, and they're going to take their shot at a title when they get it. And that might be where the Patriots are at, albeit with one of the best coaches in the history of American sports, a defense you can always count on, and a culture that is set in stone. So, like, take the win.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's a lot of worse situations that we could be in. Without getting too into it, you could be the Browns. Okay. Ugh. I mean, if we're being honest here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take the situation we're in any day. Yeah. So reverting back to the offense as a whole, we kind of touched on, Mac and the things that people have been saying about him and how we don't believe it's completely his fault, despite what other people are saying. So one of the bigger issues for the offense is the offensive line. Isaiah Wynn is still injured. Don't know if he's going to make the final roster. It's not looking too good for him right now. Trent Brown didn't play last night either, but they've struggled in maintaining any sort of protection for their quarterbacks. Not too bad last night, though. I think they only had 2 sacks. They only let up 2 sacks, which is much better than what they've been doing in practice, that's for sure. But it's also impacting the running backs. And obviously that was, that's part of the roster that we know is far deeper than any other part. And one of the deeper running back rooms in the league, actually. And we have Ty Montgomery, who was the only one to get a touchdown last night. He was the only one who was actually able to do anything as far as the running backs last night. I really like Ty Montgomery. I think he could be their new Cordero Patterson. He could be a new secret weapon is what I'm calling him. So I just collectively, how are you feeling on the running backs? Do you think it's more of it's not a talent issue, it's an offensive line issue, or is it kind of like a combination?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a combination. I mean, the offensive line, as far as I can remember, is at this point in the preseason, how they've stacked up is the worst unit that they're heading into a season with in like the last 20 years.
Yeah.
The offensive line was so consistent and so good for so long. Skarnecchia built, this like almost like offensive line dynasty that was really underrated for and we're used to almost taking those positions for granted. Not that there haven't been, issues, but I can't remember a time that I was this concerned. And now is part of it because I know there's a second-year quarterback behind center, maybe, but the right guard position looks like a little rough. Like that was Ferentz last night. He was awful.
Yeah.
And like it's all well and good to have like a good center, but like there's a lot of other holes there. And so the Patriots have also always had a really underrated, like, running back by committee group, right? Like, that's always, everybody's always known that, like, Bill Belichick's going to find a way to get yards out of running backs, whether it's 5 of them rushing for 2,000 yards or 2 of them rushing for, it's like, it doesn't matter. He's going to get the yards somehow. Mm-hmm. So it is important to what they do. Like, I don't care who you are. I don't care what year it is. You still need the threat of the run to succeed, especially if you are not one of the best passers in the league. Like, you know, even the best passers in the league need the threat of a run. So, like, it's a little bit of both. If I had to say which unit I'm more concerned about based on the history of the team itself and how Belichick usually patches these holes, I would definitely say the offensive line. I think it's so much harder to replicate good protection than it is to replicate, like, yards from the backfield. And, like, I like the mix of guys they have. Like, I think Damian Harris will be fine. Like you were saying, I think Ty Montgomery is, like, fun. Like, what he was able to do was, like, kind of he almost did some James White stuff last night. Like, he got big third down and then he got in the end zone, right? Like, that's what you want. You want a guy who can come in and convert the third downs and be, like, clutch. So if he's their clutch guy, great. I liked those little burst plays that we saw, a couple back-to-back, like, really speedy plays from JJ Taylor. Like, I think I like having a small, quick guy out there to screw things up a little bit and get through gaps and all that. So, is it the best group they've ever rolled out? No, but, like, there is a lot of promise there. And because of the coaching staff, I trust that coaching staff with running backs, right? Like, they still have the guys in place they need to take care of the running backs. The offensive line freaks me out. And even when they struggled in Brady years, like, if there was a big injury or whatever, Brady's pocket awareness was like, it was like alien. Like, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen from other quarterback. No one that I've watched with my human eyeballs as an adult could sense the pressure in the pocket the way Brady could move in the pocket the way that Brady could. So, even when there was a little bit of weakness, we didn't even always see it completely for what it was. And now those are going to be exposed because Mac's not on that level quite yet. Do I think he's going to be better than last year? Yeah. But I think the line is worse than last year. So it does concern me.
Yeah, it's Buddy actually asked, he said, is this group worse than the 2014 line after the Mankins trade? I'm like, do I remember
they traded Mankins and he was, like, retired in, like, the next year or two. Like, I mean, on the back end of his career, that trade actually is, like, surprisingly, if I'm remembering it correctly, one of the more well-timed trades of Belichick's career, because Mankins was one of the best offensive linemen in the league, one of the best offensive linemen to ever put on the Patriots uniform. And the trade was like, holy crap. And then it was kind of, I think he was retired within 2 years. Am I crazy? I think he was.
Didn't they win Super Bowl? Was it Super Bowl 49 that year, right?
Well, they traded him. So they won the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Super Bowl. Then they lost the next year in Denver. Denver won the Super Bowl. And then the next year was the Falcons Super Bowl. So, like, yeah, I mean, hard to say that everything went to crap, but again, to his point, was it Brady that was making the line better? I don't know. I can't remember everybody who was on the line off the top of my head in 2014. But there's
Jordan Devy started.
There's no chance that it was worse than what they've got going on right now. I'm sorry, but I have to pull it up because I'm going to pull up the 2015 Patriots depth chart. And we're going to look at this and answer his question in earnest because I don't know, man. There's no way.
I'm trying to think, and it's hard because, it's Tom Brady. So, he was able
that's what we've talked about. Like,
it was, he says go to opening day of 2014 is what he said.
Opening day of 2014. Okay. I'm on our lads right now. Okay. 2014 I thought Minkins was on that team in 2014. Oh, they must have traded him before the season. All right, let's go. 2014. Here we go. We got Nate Solder, Marcus Cannon, Ryan Wendell, Dan Conley, and Sebastian Vollmer. Yeah, that was a weaker group, but I still think that was a better group than this one. I mean, like, Nate Solder was really good before they traded him.
Yeah, he was like a little bit down. Like, he wasn't great that year, but he did nothing once he went to the Giants.
I think he was good that year. I think because they didn't trade him until the biggest hole on that one is Ryan Wendell at center, but
yeah.
I mean, Dan Conley was a stud. Marcus Cannon was pretty damn good. So, I mean, that was a good question. I like that he was thinking in those terms and trying to find a group to compare it to. But man, that was the year they went to the Super Bowl and won it. And, it's very hard to like it's like.
So
Tom Brady could speak with anybody.
No, I know, right? And that's the thing. It's like it's hard to compare for that reason because it's Brady. Like we were saying, Beantown Breakdown says, Sara, the Pats are literally integrating a completely new offense into their system. They've never done that before. This is something that takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. I'm not too worried. And I've seen a lot of people say that, we're obviously going to give them leniency for the new offense. But I think
at what point have we insinuated otherwise? We've quite literally said multiple times here that the whole problem is that there are some questions surrounding what this offense is going to look like. And integrating it. And let's be honest, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say it's normal to integrate a whole new offense for a quarterback in his second year. It's actually not. It's most ideal for a second-year quarterback to have offensive consistency from the season before, even if it's just coordinator and overall, playbook, right?
Right,
so
yeah.
It's not that there's I'm worried. It's just that there are clear, it's not a yes or no or a debate. There are clear flaws in their plan for Mac when he has to adjust to things that he shouldn't have to adjust to in year two. It doesn't mean it's going to fail. It's just that he's being presented hurdles that a lot of second-year full-fledged starting quarterbacks with a year under their belt don't have to deal with. You look at the consistency that Josh Allen had in his second year, the consistency that Joe Burrow had in his second year. These are guys who were able to build. Justin Herbert, they're able to build on the consistency from the year before. And this is a lot more turnover. That's all that we're saying. I think there's no pessimism in terms of giving them a chance. That's a big thing people say is give it a chance. Well, then why are we having a podcast? We got to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, and we kind of touched on it. We were saying, that it seems like it's the outside factors. If we're going to talk about Mac and his success and the offense's success, it's just the uncertainty of the direction in which they're going and who's calling plays and what they're actually going to be doing and what they're going to be trying to do. That's the part that is most concerning. It doesn't. Yeah. I don't see it as they're not capable. It's just okay, well, you haven't decided who's going to be calling plays and what plays you're going to use and what you're not going to use. And that's the more troublesome part. But as we said, I think they're capable. It's not necessarily a worry in that regard.
To figure it out. They have enough talent on that roster to figure it out. And that's whether it all comes together between the play calling and the playbook and the scheming and the head coach and the quarterback. That's a different story. We don't know if it comes together. Do they have pieces in place to make something work? Absolutely. I'm not a fan of acting like things could be awful or things could be great based on knowing nothing. And 2 preseason games in with not a lot of first team snaps, we're working with a lot of nebulousness here. So you always want to look at what are the weaknesses and whatever, and what are we seeing that are potential flaws in their plan, because those are the things we can diagnose right now. Here's a few things that could go wrong, right? We're also going to talk about things that could go right, and they're equally totally useless until we're into the season. So
And they have a lot of tough matchups this year. So if they're going to be tested, they're going to be truly tested this year. I mean, their first home game isn't until week 3. And a lot of their games are difficult teams no matter what year. Just happens to be that they're having a very difficult test in Max only his second season.
Right.
So let's move on to the defense because I feel like we've beaten the offense to death. That, of course, has been a part that everyone's been raving about in training camp. They got 3 drives in as well last night. And I feel like, there's just no worries. Judon looks like Judon, which is good. The only question, of course, with him is, can he maintain that the entire season? Because he kind of fell off in the last 5 games, which, I've mentioned it before that he played in a ridiculous amount, of the defense the entire season. He did test positive for COVID. We don't know the extent in which that affected him. A lot of the players weren't speaking on that specifically. But the second he fell off, it kind of like the defense fell off. We know what happened when they played the Bills in the playoffs. So based off of what we've seen, and we've not seen a lot, but he's looking just as good as he did at the preseason and beginning of last year. Do you think Judon is going to be back to the Judon we fell in love with last year?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was good on the Ravens, and I think he did. He was, better last year. But I think he's proven that he's a good, reliable player. Thing about teams that are in transition is that you're going to see them fall off late in the season because that's where the rubber meets the road. And last year, the Patriots were a decent, not great team. And some other teams were hitting their stride. There's a reason that people didn't want to play the Patriots in December for 15 years. Yeah. They didn't fucking lose, right? So, there's other teams that are going to be like that too. People are hitting their stride. If you're a great team, you're going to start being real great by December. Everything's clicking. Hopefully especially if you don't have injuries. On the other side, when defense is doing a lot of the work for an offense, the way that the Patriots defense was doing last year, there is going to be fatigue. There's going to be offensive coordinators across the league that have started to figure out how to game plan for you. Offensive coordinators have never been better at their job than they are in the last few years. The offensive minds are just really next level. And we've seen it across the board in the way that the rate at which they're becoming NFL head coaches and successful ones at that. So you can't just get away with, like you said, if there was fatigue, if there was COVID fatigue involved. I finally got COVID for the first time in May, and it kicked me on my ass a little bit, I'm twice vaccinated and boosted and it still busted my butt. So I can imagine these things affect you. Not super worried about Judon, and I find it, and this is absolutely I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about it, but I find it almost silly to worry about a Bill Belichick defense. Yeah. 2 weeks into a preseason, this defense is going to probably be pretty good. They almost always are. And if they're not, it's because something went horribly wrong. I think their linebackers are younger and fresher than they've been in a while. The cornerback situation is getting a little freaky with the injuries to Malcolm Butler and Joejuan Williams. But again, we worry every year about cornerback depth and defensive back depth, and then they inevitably figure it out. It looks like Jones did a pretty good job at outside. The outside cornerback position can be tough. I feel like a lot of times they get a little handsy. You have to start worrying about defensive pass interference and things like that, right? You don't want to deal with penalties or unnecessary things. So Jonathan Jones at outside cornerback looked really good, but there's maybe problems that he'll have to work out kinks, but I trust him to do that. So it's I don't know, they're probably gonna be pretty good. The pass rush looks better than it's looked in a while.
That's what I was just going to say is that I think, a lot of people are focusing so heavily on their last game of the season against the Bills in the playoffs, which I get it. That's the last memory that you have. Right. And, that was a really rough game for the defense. Obviously, we've seen it for the last 8 months that it was a perfect game.
Do they remember what the Bills offense did to the Chiefs? not a Patriots problem.
Yeah, and so I think that's why it's like if anyone's expressing any sort of concern, it's because they're so focused on that last game. But as you said, they've gotten younger, they've gotten faster, they've gotten more aggressive. Their pass rush is already looking better than it did last year. I mean, I feel they have figured out what they're still trying to figure out the like who they want on the line and who's going to be where, but so far I think that the rotation that they've had has been good. I mean, last night they got 5 sacks and 5 quarterback hits. Mind you, I know that it wasn't against Panthers starters, but the fact that they're able to
you can only go off of what you have, right? The play,
right.
I mean, that's who they played, and they did what they were supposed to do against backups. We can't be disappointed in that. We have to say, okay, good. They did what they were supposed to do. They beat them up. They only allowed 190 yards of offense. Good.
Yeah. And what's good too is that it's not, a lot of what we saw at for the first half of the season, it was a lot of Judon, which was great. I love Judon and whatever, but he didn't have like another guy with him that was as consistent, or he could kind of be like, okay, well, if it's not Judon, then it's this guy. But it's looking more like they're sharing that. We see Anthony Jennings is stepping up. Uche is having a good preseason. Raekwon McMillan. We're seeing just like all these young guys that are stepping up and they're looking good. It's going to be a difficult spot for Belichick to pick and choose like who he's going to keep around, because they're fortunate enough that they're having enough talent and they're doing enough in these games and in practices. Yeah, I'm glad that we have this problem this year.
Oh, for sure. Anthony Jennings has looked great. It's been nice to see him back on the field and like doing what you want to see him do. To your point, like Josh Uche, great. Like he's kind of exactly where I would hope he would be. And Jawan Bentley seems to be like the guy every year that gets like a little better, figures it out a little bit more, has become a veteran leader, like almost like he's the next iteration of the Gerard Mayo, Dante Hightower, like the next guy who can maybe be the centerpiece of that group, which I like love to see. I like Mac Wilson. I thought I've liked seeing what he's brought to the table in terms of athleticism. So yeah, man, it's a good group on that side of the ball. And like, you look around at the talent, you look at what their pros and their pros and cons are, their weaknesses. Every year, we worry about pass rush and secondary. That's what everybody worries about. Their pass rush is better. Their secondary is going to figure it out because they quite literally always do. Yep. Jack Jones will be interesting to watch because it's really funny. Like I'm like trying so hard not to be too excited about Jack Jones for 2 reasons. One is he's an ASU player, and the last ASU player that I rooted for so hard on the Patriots really bit me in the ass. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to go too all in. And also, he's like one of those, I don't know what Belichick's issue is. He like loves a project. He loves he's got like a little bit of some like personal conduct issues in his past. And like he always thinks he can change them, and then when he can't, he like just trades them away,
Yeah.
So, and I mean, Herm Edwards even called him like a handful. Like he's like, he's a handful, but he's a really good kid, right? So this can go ways. He really loves football. He's like small and wiry and quick, and he has like a lot of what he can bring to the table. Is like being a ball hawk type guy, right? But he's also like pretty tiny. He's like 175 pounds.
Yeah.
He's not going to win jump balls against most dudes like out there, like he's going to have to play a very specific role, but I'm still really excited by it. Like I'm excited by what he could bring to that group. So overall, I'm super optimistic. It's not the world's best breakdown of the defense, but I just genuinely feel like this is a group that can stay steady and can be a really good, if not great unit. And that's what the offense is going to need as they figure their stuff out. So the one thing I'll say defense is like, it's a lot of pressure on them to head into the season knowing they have to be kind of game 1, week 1, like ready, season ready. Like we can't, no screwing around. Like you said, between the fact that they start on the road and they have a difficult schedule this season, all of that, and they have, an uphill battle in the division now every year with the Bills, like, the defense is the unit that kind of can't screw around, kind of can't have growing pains. So over the next 2 preseason games, that's the unit where you just want to make sure everything looks like it's gelled and ready to go. The offense is going to need time. We're going to have to give them time. And the defense is going to have to be defense and special teams, right? Because it's Belichick.
Yes.
So, of course, special
Yes.
teams hold it down as well. But those units have to hold it down so the offense has time to figure their stuff out. And I believe that they can do that.
And fortunately for them, it's not a huge deviation from last year, because there was a lot of pressure on them last year to carry it too. And if we're talking about early Tom Brady, we have to remember a lot of those early teams were defensive heavy. That was where a lot of their production came from. Not saying, I always have to like preface it and make sure that people know that I am not saying Mac Jones is the next Tom Brady, but it's not like Tom Brady came out slinging and looking amazing and was future go. It was like a lot of that was defense and special teams. He contributed. I'm just saying.
No, he's still very good. I mean, there was still stuff Brady was doing at that time in his career that Mac's not doing.
Right. Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that those teams were largely carried by the defense and the kicker, and gave Brady the chance to become the player that he needed to be. And he took the ball and ran with it. Don't get me wrong. Another fun thing is this is another Jack Jones plus. So Jack Jones, Long Beach Poly guy, ended up at USC. He was really good at USC before he had his issues.
Mm-hmm.
Another Long Beach Poly guy that ended up at USC and on the Patriots. Come on now. You got to know it. Do you know it?
No, I don't.
Willie McGinnis.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, he was I love Willie. He was a little before my time, though. Before I paid attention.
Really?
Before I paid attention.
Okay.
So I saw him like in the early 2000s and stuff, but like when he was first around.
You weren't like remembering all the stuff about the players back then.
Right. Yeah, that was when I was like, oh, look at them run on the field. And the touchdown dance is so fun. Like that was why I was watching, back then.
Willie was Long Beach Poly out here is like one of the big like sort of feeder schools for like top colleges in California and like the Pac-12 and stuff like that. So like it was a big deal at the time. That's how he became really close to Snoop Dogg. They went to the same high school.
Oh wow. Yeah. Look at that connection. Look at that fact. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So we touched on the cornerbacks a little, but I want to ask you specifically about Jalen Mills. So he's looking like he's the cornerback one. I'm fine with it. But I know that that's kind of a thing with Patriots fans or even in the media questioning it a little bit just because they didn't feel like he did a wonderful job last year once Jonathan Jones went down. And now he's going to have to carry the torch. J.C. Jackson's gone. Gilmore's not coming back. How do you feel about him being the number one guy?
Listen, I mean, he has to be the number one guy because he's the most veteran in terms of like experience, and he clearly has a good relationship with the group, which I think is a good sign. You can tell he has camaraderie with the group. Mm-hmm. I think his biggest problem last year wasn't talent or ability, but was his like ability. Like I think he wasn't fully understanding what was happening on the field all the time. Mm-hmm. He was like missing his coverages, and like he seemed confused.
Yeah, like it wasn't difficult things that he was messing up. It was like things that were almost like too easy that you're kind of scratching your head like what's going on.
I don't know if he was overthinking or if like the defensive signal caller wasn't like, I don't know what was happening. It seemed like he just like didn't know where he was supposed to be a lot, and there was a lot of miscommunication. But when he made big plays and when he nailed his assignments, he was really good. Like he had some big moments. Yeah. So it's a boom or bust year for him. He's either going to get a lot better and fill in that role. Like they always, it happened with J.C. Jackson, and it happens with Stephon Gilmore, and before that it was Malcolm Butler, and before it's every single time this happens, we're like, who's going to be the number one? And someone is. Yeah. So if it's not Jalen, then maybe it's somebody else. And that's okay. I don't care who it is, because as long as they have someone who can become that, like, top 10 coverage cornerback in the league, then I'm fine. That's like, they seem to always figure it out, right? I don't want to take it for granted, but but I do think that Jalen Mills, I think the bigger issue is just like knowing what's happening on defense and having good communication with the sideline and with his signal caller on the field. And So that's what I would be keeping an eye out with him. I can't say that I have a reason to believe it's going to get better or worse. It's just something I'm going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I always reiterated with him, I think it's the consistency. So that was his biggest issue. I think I know it's not like a completely different thing, but I think people forget too that for some reason, a lot of people think he entered the league as a safety. I'm almost positive he entered the league as a cornerback. Eagles switched him in 2021 to safety. But his rookie year in 2017? He had a really good year at corner. So the possibilities.
He wasn't a safety. I don't recall him being a safety.
I'm almost positive he played safety last year.
Oh, for the Eagles.
Yes, for the Eagles. And that's what I had said. I said he played safety in 2020. 2020. Yeah. And people are like, well, he is a safety. I was like, no, he's not. He's a corner, but he's played in like all of the positions in the secondary, but that's not the safety is not like his position. That's not like,
I don't know. That's very weird for Patriots fans to be picky about, considering one of our best safeties on the Patriots used to be a cornerback. So everybody needs to check.
I know. So that's why I was like, okay. Relax. It's because I wrote about Jalen being the number one guy, and people don't like it because they want to believe he sucked last year, but it is what it is. So we talked a little about what we were worried about with the offense. Is there anything that concerns you about the defense?
I mean, I have to be honest. I don't. The defensive coordinator, like, who's going to be in charge of like this group? Because I would prefer that Belichick has his eye on the offense, and I have a feeling that he's going to be pulled more toward dealing with the offense this season. I'm sorry. I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, but my faith in Matt Patricia is subterranean. So like, I really want Belichick to have a strong grip on the offense. So like, I just want to know what their plan is on that side. Are we doing Steve and what's the plan? Are we going to have consistency? Is it going to be back and forth? Are we going to have like, 3 cameras on 3 different guys again, trying to figure out who's, in charge of the defense? Like, what is this? Cause like, I do think that they have good leaders on the field who can help the younger players and the newer players on the team, whether they're, like the Mac Wilsons who've come from somewhere else or whether they're rookies. But, it's frustrating because when you had Josh McDaniels on that headset, for all the crap that we would give him about some lackluster play calling here and there or whatever, you never had to worry that Belichick couldn't be tapped into what was going on the defensive end of things.
Yeah.
But he is like a 70-year-old man with a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I want to make sure that the defense is getting everything it needs to, like I said, be essentially the cornerstone of this team in 2022.
Well, let's just get into that because I think I accidentally skipped over it. I apparently didn't have that in my later notes. But yeah, so obviously we've seen Matt Patricia called, I think, the offensive game the entire night last night. So that kind of, so that was a change from the week before because Joe Judge had come in and I think it was for Zappe, right? I think he was in there calling plays for Zappe. That changed last night. So it's such a tricky situation because I try to be optimistic. Obviously, I didn't like when they first brought back Patricia, was not thrilled that they then brought back Joe Judge, regardless of the success that they've individually had with Belichick, years ago. They both just failed as head coaches, and then you're bringing them in and they're said to be working on the opposite side of the ball that they've never worked on, working with, as we've mentioned a million times, Mac Jones in his second year. If that doesn't worry you or concern you, I'm more concerned that it's not worrying you. So for me, it's like, you want to believe in Belichick and you want to believe that he knows what he's doing, and he's proven time and time again, of course he does. But, bringing in these new guys, giving them new titles, and then trying to implement a brand new offense into all of it, it just seems like a mess waiting to happen. And that, it freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah. I think that people who are Patriots fans or have covered the Patriots are so afraid to say, I don't know what this is, right?
Right.
But let's just step back and take a look at it. Like, Belichick knows we don't know what's going on. He's made sure we don't know what's going on. So we're not the idiots for being like, this is concerning. if anything, like it's not that it's not like a problem within Bill we trust or anything like that. It's like, if I don't know what I'm looking at, how can I believe in it? Right. Like, it's not that I don't believe it could work, whatever it is he's doing. I don't know what it is that he's doing to even believe in. It's not so I don't think that it's pessimistic to say, like, I don't get what's happening here. I think it's realistic and sort of just like it's just a fact. Like, we're not really debating anything. No one knows what's going on.
Yeah.
Is it normal? Like, let's just go down the checklist. Is it normal to hire back 2 failed head coaches immediately? No. Is it normal to make both of those guys play callers on a side of the ball they've never play called on? No. Is it normal for them to make 2 guys like that, high level coaches, split time doing that? No. Is it normal to do it with a second year quarterback as he's developing? No. So, like, none of that's all objective. Like, we know across the league, none of this is stuff that's normally done. Right. Okay, so we're going to take that into effect. Is it normal for Bill Belichick to not tell us what's happening? Yes. Okay. So, like, let's take it all and look at it and say, we don't really know what's going on here and what could possibly work and what won't. Now, under Joe Judge, the Giants offense was horrible.
Yep.
I know he wasn't their offensive coordinator, but that's kind of the problem.
Yeah.
And under Matt Patricia, the Detroit Lions offense was horrible. Again, he wasn't the offensive coordinator for a reason, but whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. At the end of the day, the head coach is in charge of the whole goddamn team, and it all falls back on them. So they haven't given us a reason to believe in them as head coaches. We have no evidence that they can call an offense. This isn't pessimism. We literally have no evidence. We've never seen it. This isn't a quarterback's coach being promoted. This isn't, a guy like one of these guys where it's like, oh, that we saw him work with Tom Brady and Mac Jones for years, and now he's been promoted and he worked under McDaniels as a play caller or whatever. Like, those guys were gone for the last 3 years that McDaniels was transitioning this offense out of Tom Brady.
Yeah.
All of this stuff is reason for us. If you don't want to use the word concern, use the word confusion. And you can't be optimistic while you're confused. And that's my stance.
Was there anyone that you were hoping, because this is something that people have asked too. I know a lot of people weren't thrilled with them coming back, us included. Obviously we're on the record saying that. And there was a lot of hype around bringing back Bill O'Brien, which to me was shocking, just because it reminded me very much of how much people didn't want him on the team when he was calling the offense. They wanted him gone. Obviously, that was years ago. But was there anyone that you had in mind that you were kind of hoping that they were going to bring in? Like, were you a Bill O'Brien person? Or were you just kind of like anybody but Patricia and Judge? Like, were you just hoping for anybody else?
I mean, it would have been nice to see, like, okay, there was someone on the staff that they felt comfortable with, but I didn't see anyone particularly that I think could have, like, filled that role. I'm not a big fan of Bill O'Brien as a human being for, like, a lot of reasons. He kind of rubbed me the wrong way. However, it's really indisputable that he's a good offensive play caller, and that he sort of understands elite offenses. Like, he was the guy who went and took the job at Penn State after, like, everything what came out about that. And it just always kind of rubbed me the wrong way to take that gig. Penn State, like, it was just a disaster. And he's just like a surly kind of weird dude. But the reason that things didn't, like, always work out the greatest between, like, when he was on the Patriots was because it was pretty clear that Tom Brady didn't get along with him that well. That's not, like, let's be honest, the longer we get to know Tom Brady, the more he's away from the Patriots bubble, the more we realize he's kind of a weirdo, he's very stuck in his ways. He's very stubborn. He's got all of these qualities that we didn't really see a lot of because they were kept really quiet and behind the scenes, to the credit of Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft. And they really made sure that Brady was under the radar in terms of his quirks and his personality traits, some of the more mercurial things about him, right? So, like, he didn't get along, and he was a Josh McDaniels guy. He wasn't a Bill O'Brien guy. That's okay. I think Bill O'Brien, again, like, I'd like to see someone younger come in for someone like Mac and for someone like Bill Belichick. Like these, not that Joe and Matt are old by any means, but like there are a lot of guys out there who maybe would bring a fresher perspective and like a pre-existing offensive identity that works for Bill Belichick. But that's a big ask. Maybe that doesn't exist for him. So like, you know, we're kind of in the situation where it's like somebody who has been on an offensive headset as their main job, I feel like is a low bar to set. You know, when people are like, well, who do you want? It's like someone who's been on an offense. That's all.
Yeah. Well, because I know that there was a lot of talk about there weren't a lot of options for them, like in the NFL specifically. And so I think that's why a lot of people were turning to Bill O'Brien because of the familiarity. And then he was working with Saban at Alabama. So then that connection with Mac was going to be what they felt like was going to be good. And I was on board with it for that reason only, because I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I wasn't ever like a big fan of his, regardless of how good he was with Brady and Belichick. But it would have been nice if they had maybe explored that. Granted, we don't know, but
maybe they did.
Yeah, and it would have been nicer than what we're seeing now, trying to bring in this brand new offense to Mac in his second year. At least if they had brought in Bill O'Brien, it was like, okay, well, I worked with you in my last year in college, so we know what we like, we know what I'm good at.
Yeah.
But it seems like that dream is not going to happen, at least not anytime soon, because I believe O'Brien said that he's loyal to Saban at this point. So if people are still hoping for that to happen, I wouldn't hold my breath. That's for sure.
Listen, there's a lot of guys who are coaching in college, high level college right now, who've had NFL experience on the offensive side of the ball, who I'm sure they could have gone and gotten. Time will tell, hopefully, why Bill Belichick made these decisions and provide us with a little more clarity. It's either going to prove that he's a genius who knew what he was doing, or it's going to show us that, like, okay, maybe it's time to consider that Belichick is stuck in a rut in terms of his decision making, and we move on from it. I'm not talking about firing him. I'm not talking about any of that. But we may have, like, this decision is a very bold one, and it's a very obviously like high risk one. And if the risk doesn't pay off, we will have some questions about how trustworthy and reliable his decision making is in terms of building a coaching staff. And that's going to be a hard decision. It's going to be a hard conversation to have. I don't want to have it. So hopefully we don't have to. Hopefully we are all being lulled into a false sense of pessimism and questions and all that stuff, and we get schooled. And I'd be happy to be schooled. Again, I don't really like Matt Patricia as a person either, but I got no problem with Joe Judge. So let's, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, we have plenty of time. We have another preseason game coming up against the Raiders. I'm actually really looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to this game in the regular season, but I think we're going to get a little glimpse of it this week. They do have the joint practices, which I believe is in Vegas, right? I think this is not at Gillette. What are you expecting to see against the Raiders? Like, are we going to? Are they? First of all, I don't even know if we're going to see either side playing starters. It's the week 3. I think this is their last preseason game, so I don't know how much they're actually going to play. But of course, the whole Belichick versus McDaniels thing is going to be a hot topic now, and then once December comes around. But are you expecting to see anything like significant in this game, or is it just going to be another preseason game? We're not going to get any hint of like what McDaniels exactly is doing and what he's trying to bring there.
No, I mean, especially considering they are supposed to play in the regular season. The Patriots play the Raiders in the regular season, right?
Yep. I know, in December, yeah.
Yeah, so Sara, we're not going to learn one single goddamn thing in this game. Yeah. Belichick knows the game he's playing. McDaniels knows the game he's playing. Neither one of them is showing one single card to the other one. Yeah. That doesn't mean that we can't find things to be excited about, look for, watch. But in terms of macro, what are we going to learn about the Raiders? What are we going to learn about the Patriots? Are we going to see any sort of coaching decisions no, none of it. Yeah. None of it. The gamesmanship has to stay intact for the regular season. So I don't anticipate that we will come out of this being like, wow, really surprising decision from McDaniels about this.
Yeah.
even if they didn't play in the regular season, you know how I feel about preseason games. It's
Yeah.
like, I want to see who gets snaps at wide receiver. I want to see how long, like, are they going to put Ferentz in again at right guard? Like little individual sort of like decisions that really have no bearing on the outcome of the game or like their relationship to McDaniels or how he functions at the Raiders. Like none of that stuff. It's all the little stuff. Like, does Humphrey have another great game, and then all of a sudden we have to talk about that stuff, which has really nothing to do with the Raiders, you know?
Yeah, and since they don't play them until December, they'll have them pretty figured out in the first few months anyway. So if you have those questions, then make sure you watch Raiders games. I might be at this game, so I am excited. I know that this one's like super hyped up. I think it's just mostly because of the McDaniels thing. So that is exciting. But with this game and what we know and what we don't know, what are you hoping to see? Is there anything you're hoping to see in that game at all? Or is it just, another preseason game?
I mean, I would like to see I would like Mac to get out there and have a few good drives, it never hurts. It never hurts to see. I would like, there's a lot of new options at wide receiver. I would like to see Kendrick Bourne on the field. So like, that would make me feel a lot better. I don't want that to fall apart. So I'd like Kendrick Bourne to be out there, and I would like Mac to get a few more reps. I just don't think it's not going to hurt. And they've got some big decisions to make at wide receiver. So I don't think that the smart thing to do is make them solely on 4 quarters of Zappy in week 3. You got to give them a little bit more to work with. And I think that we'll see a little. I don't know. I'd be surprised if we don't see any Mac, considering what they need to figure out about wide receiver. But maybe they're going to be doing more of that work in practice. We'll find out. But I would like to see a little more Mac, just for like a tiny, tiny bit of peace of mind.
Yeah, and just a better evaluation of the receivers because someone might look really good with Zappy, but they don't with Mac. And I think that's something I think that happened last year too. I can't remember who it was, but there was one that looked really good, but it was with the backup. So it was like, okay, or Stidham preferred certain receivers that Mac didn't or Cam didn't. So especially since we are on the hype train for Humphrey, I want to make sure that connection with him and Mac is good because it looks good right now with Zappy, and that has me excited. I really want him to be on the team. That's the hill that we'll die on that hill together, I guess.
Definitely.
Let's just hope that it ends better than the Cam Newton one.
The Cam Newton,
you and I we share that pain.
The biggest L's on the N'Keal Harry might have been the biggest L of my career. So I need a win. I need a win.
Yeah, I think I wasn't quite on that one with you, but I was full blown Cam Newton, and we know how that ended. But anyway, that's all I have. Did you have anything you wanted to add? Is there anything we didn't talk about that you feel like you need to get out?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm looking at my notes. I'm pretty sure we hit everything that I wanted to talk about. Like, I genuinely, I'm happy that we're almost done with preseason and we can start actually like talking about real football pretty soon.
I know.
Real games and real stakes. Like, I am so ADHD and I have like no patience for the like all the little like distractions in between like OTAs and the regular season. Mm-hmm. So I don't, that's why I haven't even like, I was like, my podcast is starting full on like previewing regular season stuff. Like I'm not even covering preseason games like you are because my brain's like, I can't take this. I can't take all of the like what ifs and like none of this mattering and some of these players being cut. Like it's always bothered me to like, I am not built for it. I'm like such a front runner of like regular season or bust. So it was actually really nice to talk to you about it because I do need to like get back into the mode of talking about the Patriots and reminding myself of like the things I want to be paying attention to. So you forced my ADHD brain to pay attention while things are boring so that I can be ready for when things are exciting. And I think we made it exciting. So
I think so too. I mean, and it's funny because until I started doing this, I wasn't someone that paid that much attention to preseason either because I was like, I was just talking about it yesterday. I'm not into college football, but since writing, I've had to write, profiles on players that I was like, oh, I like this guy. He'd be good fit for the Patriots. And then I get my hopes up and they, of course, don't draft him. And then I'm sitting there wallowing because I'm so bummed that this other team did. I'm like, that's why I don't do roster projections, because I get my hopes up about certain players. And so I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. Just tell me who the team is, the 53. And let's talk about the regular season, because that's what I need to be concerned with.
I've been there. That's why I think that's part of the reason I have like PTSD from covering like drafts and training camps, like and preseason, like just like day after day of like just projecting, players no one's ever heard of, undrafted picks, like talking about like one guy who got like 3 tackles in a game that we totally never talked about again. Like, it like, so once I no longer had to do it, like, and listen, considering my career, I'm always bouncing around. I'm sure I'll have to do it again. So good practice to be back in it. Like the days of mock drafts and the days of covering preseason, like they may be upon me again. So I have to be prepared.
Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for being the first lady on the show with me, because they're not easy to find.
No, unfortunately, no.
I know, but I'm happy that you were the first one. And let us know where we can find you. Of course, you're on Twitter, but you also have your podcast. When's that starting up?
Yeah, so that starts up again next week to preview regular season stuff, to go over the biggest off-season stories, things to look for moving forward. It's mostly NFL, but I do talk national sports news and also sometimes WWE. You know that.
I know. I forgot to mention that. I was supposed to say you were like my WWE sister.
Yes. Yeah. That's like I have a good WWE community that I'm building on the internet, which is very nice. So that's Almost Shameless with Tanya Ray Fox. That'll be back next week. I always push it out on Twitter, Instagram, and it will also be pushed out in some clips on TikTok. It goes up on YouTube. So all that stuff will be like all the info about it. I'll be tweeting out at Tanya Ray Fox. I'm Tanya Ray Fox on Instagram. Me and my like 250 followers on TikTok. You can go join us over there if you'd like. And that's where you can find me.
All right. Well, don't forget, guys, E2G Sports is going to have 4 shows on Monday. We're off tomorrow. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow them on Twitter at E2G Sports so you can get all the notifications. The first show on Monday will be First Formation at 10 a.m. Eastern. And Hey Yo Foxboro will be back on Monday as well at 5 p.m. Murph should be joining me, but he's currently sick, so cross your fingers that he will get healthy so he can join me once again. We'll talk all about the game coming up. When is the next game? Is it Thursday? Is it Friday? I don't even know.
I don't even know what day today is.
It's Saturday, but I'm like, when is their game against the Raiders? I don't know, but we're going to talk about that. Anyway, so yes, join me on Monday. Follow us on Twitter. You guys already know that, where to find me. And thanks for listening. I will see you next time. Go Pats.